yes.
Here we are. Yes. Episode 4. Episode 4. We are not quite halfway there. So there's 9 episodes total here, as far as we know.
As far as we know. Could be extra bonus stuff. I don't know.
Could be director's cut.
The director's cut. Exactly.
DVD extras. So this is but this is going to be the last Windows Mobile episode. So we've done CE, Windows Mobile. After this, we're going to do a little palette cleanser with Zunkin.
That's a moosh boosh.
A moose boosh. Yeah. And then we'll move into Windows Phone. And so onward we move through the years. These years are 2006, 2007-ish, 2005, 2007. So we're kind of like Windows Mobile 6, 6.1, 6.5-ish.
6.1, 6.5,
just before the iPhone, Android thing kind of.
That's right. Or, even because I think we were doing, you're right. I remember 6.1 was that Crossbow. 6.1. And then I don't know. And then 6.5 was hey, let's get something new.
Right.
Well, look at this shiny thing over here while I have this other much bigger team building this secret new phone that you're going to find out about in 2010, maybe.
Right. Because there was a team building Windows Phone 7, I should say.
Yes. Yeah.
Before the reboot. So
it was like concurrent, but there was a much smaller team. The cool thing is we had this plug-in capability in the UI and some other things that made it easier for a small group of people to basically do some cosmetic stuff. Yeah. To go from, 6.1 was all about device management. 6.5 was a prettier face. But this really takes us through 2007, 2008, even because the device management thing was launched at CTIA in 2008.
Yeah, I think we have a video of that a little later. The other thing was the architecture, as you mentioned, of Windows Mobile was quite modular.
Yeah.
And enabled OEMs like HTC and Samsung and folks who do kind of funky home screens and layouts.
Yeah.
And basically Microsoft took advantage of that to sort of do its own sort of facelift. Botox. They Botoxed it a little bit.
We Botoxed the phone, did little injections in the forehead, and create the illusion that you got a whole new phone. But because the discussion, the talking points was, we can't have this giant gulf of time go by with people waiting. Like, you always had to have something for holidays every,
the holiday thing was got to have new phones for holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, can't miss holiday. But a lot of interesting stuff was crammed into 6.5.
Yeah. No, it was jam-packed. I mean, it was, I think the working title of this episode is Palm Comes to Redmond. So
I love it.
That. And maybe subtitled Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
We did a poll actually on the LinkedIn group, and we got some votes on some good titles. And then we thought, well, it should be a little more positive. So, because there's a lot of good stuff that happened here.
There was a lot of good stuff. Yeah. I was actually pretty amazed at what the little team was able to do with 6.5.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Yeah. The other thing is, we also unearthed an interesting video from Bill G. Maybe I can play that now, but
that's a good idea.
He is talking about because I think last episode we closed, for those that haven't seen episode 3 yet, with Steve B saying, "Yeah, we should have made hardware." Of course, with Charlie Rose then saying, "Well, why didn't you?"
Why didn't you? Well, I don't know. We should have been in hardware early. Like, I think we have some other interviews where they said they pitched that to you, Steve. But I'm sure I'm sure Bill G won't have any excuses like that.
No. Well, let's see.
We'll find out.
Let's see what he has to say here. Hold on. Let's see. This way.
Missed being the dominant mobile operating system by a very tiny amount. So it's the biggest mistake I made in terms of something that was clearly within our skill set. We were distracted during Iron and Trust trial. We didn't assign the best people to do the work. We knew the mobile phone would be very popular. And so we were doing what was called Windows Mobile.
That's right.
We were clearly the company that should have achieved that. And we didn't. We allowed this Motorola design win and therefore the software momentum to go to Android, and so it became the dominant non-Apple mobile phone operating system globally.
What do you think he meant by the Motorola design win? Because I was sitting there going, is he talking about how...
He's talking about the droid. The droid.
Verizon, the droid.
Verizon.
Yeah, because
Well, it was interesting. Yeah, so two things about that stuck out to me. One is, going back to episode 3, Charlie Rose asked Steve Ballmer for what his biggest regret was. Phone. That's Bill Gates. Same thing. Phone.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
And then many years later, Satya.
Phone. And here we are in 2024.
Here we are. Yes, we're
together.
Reporting from the future.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're warning you.
We're warning you. We're like wartime reporters, out in the trenches with what's going on out here. And wow.
Exactly. But the other thing was, he mentioned about the framing was kind of Android versus Windows Mobile. Like, those were the two things. Like, it was almost like he was saying, like, we should have been competing against Android in terms of non-iPhone. Like, the iPhone was not it sounds like in his mind, I can't put words in his mouth, that Apple was not a target per se of Microsoft's mobile efforts. It was really Android. So I thought that was interesting, because we don't always hear that consistently. We'll see in some other episodes where Apple is very much top of mind, especially for Windows Phone.
Absolutely. It was. We basically created a lockdown phone, app store, whatever. Yeah.
Chassis, I think it was called.
Yeah, chassis. That's right. So you don't think we're hearing, like, people try to rewrite history or create a different narrative of how things played out?
Well, everyone has their own perspective, right? I mean,
yeah.
I think we're seeing that in some of these quotes, and we're seeing it in some of the interviews too. People have their perspective and what they saw as the strategy and the priorities at the time. And then, there's the interviews, decades later, like some of these are, where it's like,
And then the whole antitrust trial.
Coulda. That one. I mean, I guess they were distracted by the antitrust trial. That's why they didn't do the right stuff in mobile. I don't know.
I'm not buying it. I mean, the antitrust thing, that was late 90s.
Yeah.
Right away, maybe a little into 2000, maybe.
I mean, the main reason Microsoft didn't get into the phone hardware business was because they were in the Xbox hardware business, and it was burning like $1 billion hole in their pocket. And that's what we've heard. And then, because of that, there was no appetite to get into the phone hardware business. Like, well, if we can get Samsung and Motorola to build them, then we're good.
It was an interesting thing I remember popping up related to the antitrust thing. It was related to Apple. Why wouldn't Apple be attacked for having a monopoly, even though they didn't have the numbers? But I remember there was this notion. It's like, they make the whole thing. They make the hardware. They have the software. It's the whole deal. And since Microsoft doesn't make the hardware and we use all these other things, we can be monopolistic, but they can't. Now, today, Apple faces some things. And so, I just don't know how much that flies or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you ever watch any of that stuff on TV? All the Bill Gates and everybody in the courtroom,
I haven't. Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since
I say the courtroom. I mean, they were in Washington, D.C. in front of Congress. Like, lots of tech executives find themselves these days, right?
Yeah. Easy target.
Exactly.
Easy target. Tech companies get in there and get grilled.
Yeah, they do.
I heard there's something like, I heard Scott Galloway say there's been something like 40 congressional hearings on like internet safety over the past whatever, and like zero legislation, basically. So
it's all for show.
I don't want to be that cynical, but
we're not cynical at all.
No,
we're not jaded.
It's all good.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Speaking of bringing it back to the reason why people are watching.
What?
Hey, it's about the gear. So I think maybe we should go off to the museum again. Jolly old England.
Yes. We can fly British Airways this time.
One of my favorite phrases is a Britishism called knackered and cream crackered, which means you're very tired. Knackered and cream crackered. So
that's a new one for me.
Yeah, we'd have to try that one. But maybe we'll go over and see what these guys are up to, right?
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Great devices back then.
Okay, well, welcome back. We are off to the museum again with our friends Ben and Matt. We're going to, in episode 4 here, we're kind of, in the end game of Windows Mobile before we shift over into Windows Phone. And by the way, the next episode is around Kin and Zune, so that's a real palate cleanser. But we're going to get into some amazing phones today. Ben and Matt from the Mobile Phone Museum, where they have literally thousands and thousands of phones. If you go to their website, mobilephonemuseum.com, you can dig into all of them. But we really appreciate them being here and sharing with us some of these devices and stories. So Ben and Matt, welcome back.
Thank you very much indeed, Pete. And thanks for the intro on the Mobile Phone Museum. We're doing our best to capture some of this history, but a real plea to anybody watching these episodes. If you've got stuff stored up here with stories behind these devices, we'd love to hear from you. We do not have all the stories and the write-ups for these products. There are people out there who know these products intimately, and we don't just want to know what specs it had. We want all the dirty details of the development and what happened. So we try and record that. But today, Pete, it's 2005 we're digging into. There's some interesting things going on, and there were some really exciting products. And the one I'm going to start with, which was a real cutesy product at the time, everybody really loved this product, was the Moto Q. So this device here, July 2005. And the buzz around this product, I don't know whether you remember, but the buzz around this product, which everyone was calling the Razorberry, was massive. That had been going on for months and months and months before they did this. And the CEO of Motorola at the time was a guy called Ed Zander. And he...
I remember him from Sun Microsystems
on stage in July in Chicago, and he called it a real must-have device for everybody. They were super excited about it,
and it's super thin. If you look at the side, I mean, one of the things about it was today we're like, oh, whatever, but that is for that time period was revolutionary to have a phone that thin. I think it was also accented by the fact that it had the wider keyboard. It made it feel even thinner, because it had that width too.
It was actually the thinnest QWERTY device in the world when it was announced. So it did something, and it was one of the first devices to use Windows Mobile 5 running the smartphone edition. So it was a super key product. It had the D-pad on it. It had the navigation wheel on the side, which is very clever. No touch screen, so it was all button driven, which was important. It had Windows Media Player 10. So you had that. Steve Ballmer was so excited about it. He declared, I think in the press release, that the Moto Q was amazing, blending stylish design and fast network speeds with Microsoft's powerful Windows mobile software. So it was a huge thing.
You know, Ben, you just said it had Windows Media. Are you telling me that phone could play music?
It clearly must have been able to play music and video.
Are you saying it's like a kind of a screen? It could do music. It could be a phone. It could be an advanced internet device, all in one in 2005. What? That's impossible.
You just have to figure out the DRM on the Windows Media Player, then you're in good shape. That's the only issue.
Pretty good. I mean, and Verizon was super excited about this as well. They believed that it would redefine consumers' experiences of a QWERTY device, and they could stay connected over the weekend, but it had a cool enough design for a Friday night. How about that?
And also, BlackBerry was so top of mind back then culturally as well. I mean, everywhere you looked, I was just rewatching like the West Wing and some of these older TV shows, and the BlackBerry was kind of the thing. Every successful person had one. And so this was really Microsoft's big front of their war, and mobile was winning that war. And so getting Motorola to pair up with them against BlackBerry was a big deal. And so, Motorola really delivered with that device.
Yeah. And that momentum continued. And this brings us to another giant of the PDA and smartphone market, which was Palm. Now, Palm had the Trio. They were running it on their own Palm OS, which was years old by this point. They were struggling. It just wasn't good enough, and they needed something
on Pilot
for the retail market. And here's the device that they did it in, which I think, Rob, you loved this product at the time. This is the Trio 700W.
That was a great device, great keyboard, very Palm-like, but square screen, a little different. But that's what Palm was accustomed to. The anecdotal story is I won that device in a contest inside the Windows Mobile division, with our mobile communications business. Yes, because they were trying to get people internally to build apps and stuff, and so I built this whole supply chain software that could sync and do stuff with the devices, and I won. And my prize was that device.
Nice.
On Verizon.
So, yes, a couple of interesting things there you said, Rob, which I think is important about this device. I mean, firstly, it was based very much on the Trio 650, which is a palm-powered device. So there's a lot of goodwill. There are a lot of people who love this device and this form factor. But the screen ratio was a catastrophe for Windows Mobile because they tried to shoehorn that user experience into this 1x1 screen, and they were used to like a 3x2 kind of approach. Also, there were some obvious things missing. This thing had no Wi-Fi. So you were wholly dependent on a pretty slow cellular connection. There was no PC tethering. It crashed a lot. It just didn't really deliver, and it was part of the kind of slow downfall of Palm. This product. We obviously had then the whole story of the the Palm evolution into creating.
I wonder how much some of those feature issues were driven by the telco, by the mobile operator, to say we don't want Wi-Fi, we don't want tethering. All data must go over our network. I mean, there were some of that back then too, because they had pretty restrictive tariffs and plans around PC tethering. I think a lot of telcos were afraid people would connect them to their laptops, which they were doing all the time in Europe. But with the advent of more internet video and things like that, I think a lot of telcos were freaking out about connecting PCs over cellular through those phones. So that might have been one of the issues there, but
I don't know.
And so we move on from 2005 into 2006. And this is when HTC was starting to emerge as a brand kind of in its own right. They were really the company, they became synonymous with Windows Mobile. They were just, incredible, or Windows Phone and, what they were doing. So, or Windows Mobile. So the product here that I wanted to pull out was there's a couple of products, the HTC Titan and the HTC Wizard, these products here. So pretty chunky old devices. But the thing about these that set them apart was this side slider approach.
Slider.
So you had, the whole benefit of a phone, as you would expect it, but then you were able to have the keyboard. You had all of the kind of rich Microsoft email experience, exchange integration. So, this was a very important product. I mean, Rob and Pete, I don't know whether you had thoughts on this. I think, Matt, you were rolling these out as branded devices in Europe.
Yep.
So this was very important. Really,
that was that slider. I don't know who the first one was with the slider form factor, but it might have been HTC. But everyone was trying to figure out how to combine that, like a usable keyboard, with a PDA sort of experience. And
it was interesting with that Titan and the Titan 2, which looked very similar. HTC was also pushing this. We were now in the 3G age. And they actually had their own video kind of conferencing, almost like FaceTime or, it came built in with that device. It was either built in with the Titan or the Titan 2. They looked the same. And I absolutely remember it was built in and you could do video calls with people, which seemed revolutionary at the time. And I remember buying a bunch of those. We used to do this conference every year called MEDC. It's our mobile developer conference. And, I remember because I was working in developer product management and marketing, and I bought, a zillion of those and showed them all, synchronizing SQL CE database on that with SQL Server and a bunch of enterprise stuff. And we were really geeking out. But great device.
And this form factor really evolved on. So they had the S710. Then they had, this was one of the last ones, but the S730. So you can see how much HTC was so good at industrial design. They evolved it onto this very phone-like version of this big chunky thing, which again still had that fantastic keyboard. I loved this product at the time. It was a real genius product. So that's another interesting one.
So back then, also keep in mind, phones back then primarily were still business devices a lot of times. And so email was sort of the killer app, remote email. And so the keyboard was, so foundational and really was so key to the part of the value prop of the device itself. And that's why when Apple came out with the iPhone and, all the backstory about how there was arguments about whether there should be a keyboard or not. And that was just a real disruptor and a huge bet to sort of ditch the physical keyboard. It was like, yikes. But I'm gonna preview for one of our future episodes that really one of my favorite sliding keyboards, which is the Kin 1. And this is a beautiful curved, has actually a curve to the keyboard, and a feel for the buttons as well, because back then it was all about like, you're texting. So
I'm really looking forward to that Kin episode, Pete, because we have those devices, but I don't know the full story of Kin, so that'd be a nice one. Now, anyway, you were talking about QWERTY, 2006. It's still pre-iPhone, and BlackBerry were riding high. They were owning the smartphone space. Everything was QWERTY. No one was really thinking in the world, how could you have a smartphone that wouldn't have a physical keyboard? And that's where HTC brought this device out, the HTC Excalibur. Rob, what was this called in the States?
It's called the T-Mobile Dash in the States.
There you go.
Yeah, very popular device. Saw it everywhere.
I think it was pretty low cost too. Wasn't that expensive?
Yeah.
And they sold a lot of those, and they just blew the doors off of that thing at so many different telcos as kind of like a telco branded device.
Yeah, so just like the Q is based on smartphone, so no touch screen or whatever. It was all driven by the keys.
Pretty thin.
And Motorola were continuing to innovate as well. So they'd done the Q, as we talked about here. They then had the Q9. I'm not actually going to take it out of this bag. Anyone who's got one of these in a drawer, it's probably stuck to the bottom of the drawer. Motorola used this soft touch plastic finish, which is one of the things we hate the most in the museum, because any device that had that, they deteriorate and they turn into a sticky mess. I don't know any of these products, but absolutely terrible. But that was another of these important QWERTY devices. And then everyone was piling in. So next thing, HP are making a phone. They made this ugly thing, the iPac voice messenger, pretty unremarkable product, but they were having to move away from that PDA form factor, people saying, we just want a phone. And that was an interesting thing.
Business devices. I don't know if you have a Samsung Blackjack, but the Blackjack was in the same vein as the Q, Samsung's answer to the Q. And the interesting thing was there's a backstory there around the legal issues Samsung faced calling it a Blackjack. They got a little bit of a stiff wind from BlackBerry.
They did
for naming that device a Blackjack, and I don't know how it got resolved, but
I remember now.
I remember working with those guys.
Motorola as well, because this is actually the Blackjack 2, by the way. It's not the Blackjack, but
the Blackjack 2 is one of our best-selling phones ever. Actually, it was hugely popular.
Wasn't there a Matrix edition of that or something, or what was that?
Samsung had a Matrix phone that was
around that time, probably.
Different,
But this was
Blackjack. That was
cool. It was all about QWERTY. But then,
right.
I guess when we were prepping for the show, we were talking about that real revolution when HTC went and started skinning the devices big time using their HTC Sense UI. So we had the HTC HD, and then we had this device here, which was the HD2. And obviously we've got a lovely picture here of what that Sense UI looked like. So they started with the HTC Diamond, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Really amazing product. Unbelievable packaging. I should have dug the packaging out for the show. I'm sorry I haven't got that here right now. But here you had this UI, you had this kind of Rolodex type clock on there. You had the weather. Matt, you were talking about the weather, weren't you? That was something you liked. You remember that?
Yeah, the way whatever was happening outside would appear on the screen.
Yeah, and
so it was
there were like trips of rain on the screen, which
the rain would come down, lightning bolts across the screen.
Yeah, this was a beautiful device, and on top of this, the point of this device as well. 2007, the iPhone's just come out, but it was lovely, and the screen was huge.
Yes.
I know it looks small now. If I put that next to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it's ridiculous, right? It looks really, really small. It was like a huge, great big dork flag if you were using this phone. It was massive. But it was the biggest.
It was usable as well. You could use it with one hand. It was a really good UI, a really good size, really good form factor.
Yeah, the HD2
UI was iconic, and everyone was kind of chasing on. And HTC then obviously took some of that over to the Android experience as well. I think
They did. I think they learned a lot on us before taking all their
stuff with them, packing up their bags and going to Android.
I think they hired some Microsoft designers too from the design team to work on. Yeah, they went to HTC and worked.
I mean, they even changed the email client. I mean, they changed everything and arguably made it better and more beautiful. The other thing about HD2, the other thing about HD2, when you get towards the end and then Android had launched, you know, the whole XDA developer, the whole world of people getting ROMs and flashing devices with different ROMs, the HD2 became the most popular device to flash new builds of either Windows Mobile like 6.5.3 or Android on it. And so hackers love that device. They made it do all kinds of things.
And one of the guys I remember vividly who came over from Microsoft to HTC was a guy called Horace Luke, who was very much involved in that HTC Diamond Touch. And they had taken, and that was the very first iteration of HTC Sense. And it really was just a skin on the top. You only had to do a couple of clicks and you were back into the Microsoft UI. But it was like a magician's trick when he demoed that product. I remember, I mean, I still regret to this day the research note I wrote about that because I had the headline on that product, which was HTC Diamond makes Windows Mobile shine. And it was like, and it was the wrong thing, because on the face of it, it did. But actually, once you dug down into the UI, there was this huge conflict between their Sense UI and the native Microsoft UI, and it was just a mess. But it was a remarkable piece of engineering, and they refined it. When they got to this product, it was much more refined. It went more layers deep, and it was a really fantastic experience. So that probably is a nice place where, you know, we've kind of we've rattled through some products there, but that does take us to a kind of seminal point in where the product got to. And I guess then we have the kin adventure to look forward to, Pete.
Yes. And then off to Windows Phone after that. So this was like, this was kind of like in that zone we were talking about earlier, is like toward the end of Windows Mobile's life, and the iPhone had already been introduced in Android. And so there was a lot of disruption going on in the industry. Microsoft was trying to reboot their strategy and their products. OEMs are still trying to ship and innovate on this existing platform. So it was really a fantastic time, and and more to come. But Matt and Ben, once again, fantastic collection of devices. I encourage folks to go to the mobilephonemuseum.com and check out more and spend endless hours of your day during the workday. You can actually do this. Spend time on mobilephonemuseum.com. But really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having us along. As I said, I would appeal again to anybody who knows, if you go on the site and there's like blank fields where the description is, or you read stuff and it's not correct because we're not going to get it all right, or you've got stories for these devices, reach out, hello@mobilephonemuseum.com, or reach out to us on LinkedIn or on the website itself. We'd love to hear from you. We want to capture this history in the way that you guys are doing with this fantastic podcast series.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thanks again, folks.
Thanks, guys.
Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow.
Cheers.
Those phones, there's some really cool ones. I remember the Motorola Q. I mean, that was kind of like, I remember the last episode we called it peak mobile, but this one, that was probably Q was hot.
Yeah. Q was hot.
I forgot it was the thinnest QWERTY ever.
Yeah. No, there were really hot devices there.
Blackjack was great.
Blackjack was huge, man. Yeah. So huge that they get sued, cease and desist, something like that.
They were too huge. It's too huge. But back then, having Motorola and Samsung in the portfolio was a big deal. I think we had mentioned, maybe we were talking to Todd about this last time too, but even though we had, Microsoft had these OEMs building Windows phones, I mean, no one was really taking a dependency on Windows Phone. There was a lot of, we'll build it and see what happens. And they had a lot of other phones.
Right.
And I think we even heard from some of the Microsoft folks saying, they would go in and they would, they'd really push the other phones, and they would place this one, so it wasn't as impactful. Part of it is because they didn't have a hard dependency, and the way they compensated their salespeople wasn't necessarily aligned with Microsoft devices.
we would always hear this from our sales organization.
All
know
the time.
Well,
which was a factor of not being in the phone business.
So what was that
term?
In the phone business? What was the term? Was it spiff or what was
spiff?
I don't know. There was basically the sales folks inside a mobile operator's retail store were getting some kind of incentive,
rewards and prizes
for different phones.
Yeah, but again, not being in the phone business, you're now taking a dependency on some other OEM to then motivate their salespeople.
Yeah.
And by the way, your phone has an operating system with a bill of materials on it that drives down the margin. So
yeah, kind of a problem.
But the phones were cool, man. The phones were cool. I remember on the Q too, they had that little wheel.
Yes, that was really slick.
Pretty impressive.
For any of you, if you're watching us, you're a mobile phone aficionado and historian by default. So maybe some of you saw the BlackBerry movie, and I love the scenes when they're cobbling together and they have the little rocker wheel on the side, and they're just hacking stuff together. We're going to make something. I don't know what it's going to be. Is it a pager? Is it a phone? Is it an email device? I don't know.
Who knows? All three. Is it an intranet device? Is it a phone? And is it an iPod? I don't know. That's another episode.
It is.
Yeah, no, that was cool. So I think the next thing here we can why don't we talk? Well, let's see. Should we show the video or should we just introduce our special guest? I don't know. Maybe we'll show the video as like a preview to our special guest.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? We'll show that.
Yeah.
And this will put you in the mood.
Yes.
And this will transport
you back. Put you in the mood like what you're about to say.
Okay, let's see what happens here.
I'm going to hold my breath.
Show you a little bit of this work, and so I'd like to invite Brian Hoskins, Senior Product Manager in our mobile communications business, to come up on stage and do a brief demonstration for you. Please welcome Brian.
Mobile communication business.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, he's wearing the standard issue Microsoft blue shirt.
System Center Mobile Device Manager has 3 important benefits, which I'll demonstrate today.
That's right. No wrinkles.
First is device management. We are enabling the management of mobile devices in the same way we manage PCs today through Active Directory and group policy.
Compelling.
Now, this is going to enable things like easy enrollment, over-the-air software distribution, and rich inventory and reporting. Second is the need for critical security management. For the first time, we can configure policies based on user or corporate needs.
So this is
and the final piece, I think everyone in the audience will appreciate, mobile VPN. We are providing a secure link from the device to resources behind the corporate firewall. Now, this is the first mobile device management solution to bring together all 3 of these elements in one place. This is going to revolutionize how we think about mobility in the enterprise today. Let's take a look.
All right.
Now, Steve, the guys backstage said that you needed a new device. Maybe you lost your old one. I'm going to show you how easy it is to get this set up.
There he is.
Good. I would hate to lose it, but just in case. Well, the first thing we're going to do is go to our self-enrollment website. And what you see here, we have the ability to enroll your device and get a password. Type in your device name and create an enrollment
request. But it gets more and more exciting as we go.
And from there, I'm generated a one-time password.
Okay.
Now let's go over to our device. And I already have the enrollment wizard pulled up here. It's a native part of this operating system.
Any user who can log into
email.
Active Directory can go
SteveB@contoso.com.
That's exactly right, Steve. It's a very simple and easy process.
Now he's going to get
So I've already typed in your email address here. I'm going to click on Next, and we'll take that one-time password, and we're going to enter it in here. It's 939. Don't tell anyone.
Uh-oh.
And we're going to click on Next, and over the next few minutes, policies and settings are going to be pushed down to your device completely over the air.
Cool.
Now, it's important to note this is actually joining Active Directory. We're becoming an object in Active Directory, which is going to create all sorts of group policies a little bit later on that we'll show you. Wow, look at that.
Yes. Enroll.
Wow, look at that.
It keeps going, but you get the gist.
Yes. I'm often thought of as the father of mobile device management, but I have to admit, that's like the last thing I did before I joined Microsoft. I had a mobile device management company and had an exit for all you VCs out there who are interested. but it was managing pocket PCs and early smartphones. And but what was novel about this, because most of them are like, I'm managing and pushing software out to it, health of the device, some security. Right. But what was novel about this was for people who live in the Microsoft world, which was every company on the planet, everybody used Active Directory. And so there's a whole lot of IT pros who that's how they thought. And so the idea that I could join the domain and it's just like a laptop or a desktop, that was powerful. Group policy was how IT pros lived and breathed. So that was compelling. And then that VPN, having that automatic VPN deal going the whole time. It was the power of three. They put it all together. I was going to make fun of it, but it's actually compelling even now.
Yeah. No, it is actually. It was, and like you said, there was a lot of third-party pieces there, but having it, natively supported just like a PC, that was played to Microsoft's strengths right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that being said, how much of that was in Windows Phone 7? I mean, I don't know.
Oh, I have a story for you, but maybe we'll wait on that story.
We'll save that one. Save
that one. Yes.
Okay.
Who are we talking to today?
We are talking to John Traynor.
Oh, I love John.
John is he is the guru of things like mobile device management and Windows Mobile 6. He ran a lot of the kind of business development and focus on the enterprise for Microsoft in the Windows Mobile era. So there's really nobody better and knows this stuff better than John. So maybe we will magically transport ourselves and listen to what John has to say. How's that sound?
It's a great idea.
Here we go.
All right.
Super. So, John, thanks for joining us. Guest here on episode 4, and maybe you can kind of quickly introduce yourself to Rob and I and all of our listeners, and kind of your role in this whole saga.
Yeah, great to be with you, Pete and Rob. And first few episodes have been really exciting. So glad to be part of the opportunity to tell a little bit of the story and go down memory lane a little bit. I moved over into the mobile and embedded devices group, as it was known then, later to be renamed the mobile communications business, around 2003. I had been at Microsoft just about 12 years at that point. Started in Microsoft Canada in late 91, did a bunch of stuff in Canada, moved to the US in 99 to run US retail. And so anything that was in a box that came from Microsoft at the time, whether it was Circuit City or CompUSA or lots of other people who don't exist anymore. Seems like people don't buy software in boxes.
Circuit City. Oh,
Circuit City. That's great folks. And it was a great time. And I just, had been doing that for several years, had an opportunity to kind of move into a different area. I had started my career more in sort of an IT sort of space. And so we were looking at combining a bunch of products together under a single brand in the server space. And so I ended up running IT audience marketing for a short while to understand why IT professionals maybe didn't like us as much as we would like them to like us. And that was great. I enjoyed that experience, but I missed thinking about the individual consumer and the dynamic of somebody picking something up off the shelf, kind of walking out the door and using it. And it seemed like physical devices were that. Software wasn't going to be in a box for too much longer, but you still had to buy a phone and a physical device. Even when I was at Microsoft, I'd been an early RIM user. I had a RIM 957 with its 4-line display and the little chiclet keys. And it was great. And I remember talking to somebody in the Windows embedded group at the time about why I was using this kind of device instead of a Windows CE device, like a compact device or something like that. And I said, well, the RIM gets me email instantly. And they're like, no, but you can bring your Windows CE device and tether it back at your desk and, sync your email and then do email when you're away and sync it later. And I'm like, I don't think that's the experience that people really want. So
it doesn't feel like instantly, does it?
No, so it was interesting where I sort of came in from an IT background, wanting to get involved in sort of kind of physical devices, and then actually by the time I left the mobile communications business, I was responsible for marketing for System Center Mobile Device Manager, which was getting these devices manageable by IT. So kind of for the time I was there, it was a good combination of both the consumer piece and the IT piece and sort of the enterprise piece all rolled into one in what was an exciting and growing market.
Yeah. And I think, so we're talking about kind of late, like 2007, 2009 timeframe here, roughly in this episode. And, we had an earlier episode and we were kind of reminding people that when we first started in this platform business, like Windows CE and these other things, these were not only were they not connected, they were rarely connected devices, and that's where it was like once a day or every few days, you would tether it with a cable to your PC or something and then sync and then go. And that sort of mindset sort of stuck for a while, like you were saying. And I think by this time in 2007, I mean, it was pretty straightforward. These were connected devices over, I think 2G or maybe not quite.
128 kilobits per second. That was speedy. I mean,
that's right.
Would download quick and it would just sort of, drip in the background and you'd take it out of your pocket and there was the email from, right now.
Right. And there was, settings for, and probably still are in some phones today, like not including images in your email and all kinds of other things to sort of save bandwidth, right?
GPRS back then.
And
GPRS.
Separate settings for roaming, because my goodness, you did not want to download your email or attachments when you were roaming, because, that was $50 a megabyte or something back in the
you think about that,
I guess, for CDMA.
That back thread, though, when you talked about the BlackBerry, not only just instant email, they had push, but they also had this great security story, this double encryption, remember it was going through all their own data centers. They had their own pathway.
Yep. You've got the BlackBerry Enterprise server, the BES, and then you've got the NOC, the Network Operations Center. And they did have a story they told about the security of that and how they pulled that. And, at the time when we started, kind of leading sort of enterprise and SMB marketing, we were trying to get a message out there that said, hey, you don't need all that, right? Your Exchange server, Exchange 2003 even, included that capability to sync directly with devices. So, we were sort of looking at that and saying, hey, compared to brand X, you don't need a whole bunch of, client access licenses for your BES server. You don't need, extra things behind the firewall. You could do it all with Exchange. And I think that was the beginning of being successful with that, because at least some large customers said, oh, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar bill if I take 20 or 30,000 employees and give all of them mobile email access, which is the expectation. Remember, at the time, BlackBerry was often reserved only for senior executives. In fact, in some organizations, you had arrived at a senior position, you were handed a BlackBerry, and you too got to do mobile email in the early days. Right?
What did we all see? What did we all see when we were flying business class? Everybody in business class had a BlackBerry.
Had a BlackBerry, or like the West Wing. I was rewatching the West Wing the other day. The BlackBerry, that was the thing to have. If you're in the White House.
Do you feel like some of that BES server and the security that drove some of the thinking to lead to the System Center mobile device manager thing that you worked with?
Yeah, I think the interesting sort of dynamic, which in hindsight is easy to see, that there was this notion that because we had, in a sense, named it Windows Mobile. It was going to be Windows. And so just like PC should be manageable with System Center, well, we guess these mobile devices should equally be manageable. And yet, similar to the relationship with the Exchange group, it did seem at times that we were kind of beating our own drum to say, hey, we need to have this so that we could be fully part of the Windows family. And yet the market might have been moving in a direction that said, hey, the mobile experience ultimately doesn't need to be the same as the desktop experience. The mobile device is not a small desktop, but I think that was the prevailing thought in some areas at the time, and so that's how we kind of ended up in that interesting dynamic. And we were so focused on the business market and beating BlackBerry.
Right. And also the Exchange team also, though, I mean, I think you were mentioning, is they did a good job of licensing kind of Exchange connectivity out to lots of platforms. So it wasn't exclusively on Windows Mobile, right? It was, I mean, we'll talk about the iPhone and other things, but they were doing a good job sort of getting it out there and trying to just sort of, from a services perspective, getting the biggest number of sockets possible.
Yeah, I think that works both ways, right? I mean, that's exactly what the Exchange team should have done, which is, hey, we want as many, clients as we can have, mobile, desktop, whatever it happens to be, license the technology. I mean, equally, I think, people shouldn't think that Windows Mobile was solely tethered to Exchange, right? We could do IMAP 4, we could do POP 3, email at the time, which, worked with some services, worked better than others.
Sure.
None of this really was
AOL mail, you know.
Yeah, people would have to remember like what ports were being used and whether or not it was, over a secure connection with a different port number. And it was hard for a user to, sort of get started with those things, which is, I think, one of the things that made BlackBerry, it just sort of just worked. You got your BlackBerry.
Right. It was vertically integrated from device to cloud, metal to cloud, as they say.
Yeah.
And then they monetized the service and probably made some margin on the device. It was a nice little, not a nice little business. It was a big business. And
it's a big business.
And I think Microsoft tried to bring some ecosystem platforming stuff into that. And maybe, I think it was tied pretty well integrated with Windows Mobile, right? I mean, that was pretty much the golden path, was Windows mobile devices to Exchange.
Yeah, no, that was the, sort of the, you don't need a BES, you don't need a NOC in there, you don't need to pay for all that. It's going to be less expensive to, to do these things together. And we talked, you said big numbers, but I mean, it was like still tens of millions, hundreds of millions of devices. Like later on, it would be great to, be 300-400 million devices. That sort of pales in comparison to what the device universe looks like. So
back then, a successful phone was 1 million units. I mean, that was a big
absolutely.
Hit.
That was a huge deal for things like the Moto Q and others at the time. Those were still big numbers for a lot of.
We were like handing them a trophy or something when they got to 1 million devices.
It was like a gold record or something. But what was your favorite of that era? What was your favorite device or devices? You mentioned the Moto Q, which I loved. I loved that.
Yeah, the Moto Q was great, and there was some very cheeky marketing, around that with sort of different groups. TELUS in Canada, in particular. Had some interesting things to say on transit stops and in other places, which got people's attention. And that's we had worked with the carriers to try and sort of get the business messaging out. But I think where it was more successful was really when people had turned it into something that was also consumer focused and consumer kind of friendly. But in terms of favorite device of the era, I saw so during this time frame between 07 and 09, I left Microsoft, ended up at Palm, and so it would be hard for me to not say the Palm Trio Pro, which was a kind of a wonderful device. Still had a physical keyboard, on it, and sort of very still oriented towards the keyboard. But for Windows Mobile 6.5, sort of all time, probably the HTC Touch Pro 2 had a unique skin on it from SPB software, and it was just kind of fun to work with, and it was just sort of a pure slab. There was no buttons physically on the bottom of the unit like there had been in the earlier Touch Pro. So I have fond memories of that, and I couldn't find one. There are other devices in my house, so this is a slightly later HTC device. I went through a number of HTC devices after my time at Microsoft and after my time at Palm, but I guess one of the interesting things, there was just so many different devices at the time. Like you had a big choice, which both hurt us and helped us, right? I mean, you sort of had this variety, but then you couldn't, as we're talking about numbers, you couldn't really get volume with any one particular OEM or device, or sort of use that as the hero device going into business marketing.
I mean, we had the Motorola's. There was Motorola. Samsung was a big one. You mentioned Palm. I think this was also the era where we had kind of a long tail of devices. Like I know there was a lot of efforts to take the Qualcomm reference design and wouldn't say commoditize it, but sort of platformize it out there, in Taiwan and other markets, where it was like getting to like low cost Windows mobile phones, where it was kind of a little challenging there, right? Because like you said, everyone needed to ship a certain amount of volume. The total available market still wasn't huge.
It was such an interesting time, not only between the device OEMs wanting to differentiate themselves from each other, but the mobile network operators also wanted to differentiate from other operators. You saw a lot of white label Windows mobile devices that were branded by the operator, and someone else made it, like HTC or whoever. I mean, the first team I worked on back in the mobile communications business, we were flying all over the world and writing code to create different graphical user interfaces for our phones for different operators in different parts of the world, so it would look different than their competitors. And that was the thing.
I mean, it was like at that time that the carrier differentiation was very big. I mean, in contrast, like when the iPhone came along, it was effectively take it or leave it. From Apple. We had been very, very flexible. We always wanted, at least, 2 devices with 2 different carriers in as many countries. Like the sort of the minimum bar to, to be there. And so, HTC in particular did lots of different sort of variations, and had those branded with others. So there was quite a variety. I remember doing effectively kind of world tours, almost, at least once a year, where we would visit what we call the BG leads, the business group, sort of the mobile leads in sort of major markets. And so we'd go through, Germany and France and Italy and the UK, and then we would do an Asia swing through, kind of Japan and Hong Kong, and we'd go to Singapore and, into Australia and so on. There was quite a variety of different devices available in different markets under slightly different models. And so we'd always have to make sure that the slides we had for the Australian presentation, okay, we need the Telstra devices in there. Make sure, is that the most recent artwork? Which one is that? Because there was so much variety around the world.
Well, it was a very mobile operator centric world back then. That was the business. And I think Microsoft snapped into that because Microsoft loves to work with big corporations. And that you look at it today, I mean, most people wouldn't realize when you look at Samsung, it's a very, it's a Samsung centric world. It's an Apple centric world. And it's a very brand centric world on the OEM side. But back then, like you said, it was Vodafone, and Vodafone had a portfolio of devices that they ranged from global into these different geos. And it was an HTC badged up with some really awful apps on it, usually from the telco for some reason. They're still not that great, but it was an interesting time to, that's much different.
The one thing the mobile operators, and mobile operators was the polite term, carriers was the impolite, term. They didn't want to be seen as, a so-called dumb pipe. So they were looking for a way to differentiate. I remember very clearly a conversation with
today. That's the same issue, by the way.
Yeah, I won't mention which operator it was, but we're having a conversation of what is their differentiation, and their answer was, we get devices to market first. We'll have a device, 3 months or 6 months before somebody else, and that by itself, okay for a launch, but it didn't seem like that was really a sustainable, type of thing. And ultimately, not.
Some things
you know what that change. Sounds like? That also sounds like they also used, prior to how the iPhone rammed through our way or the highway way of updating devices. That was another thing. Different operators think we're going to have the updates to your OS sooner, because that was the thing. People would be waiting forever for the operator to test the update to the software or the firmware to make sure it works on their network. Whatever.
Some of them had the 6.5 update, some didn't.
And it's amazing. There was apparently so many different flavors of GSM that every device needed to be tested by every carrier on their own.
It turned into sort of a matrix hell of testing and certification. So I was going to ask you, this is also the era when, and we'll play the video in the bigger segment. But when Steve B, the infamous video where he talked about the iPhone and how it's like a, really expensive, $500 device with no keyboard. That obviously didn't age well. But so what was the sense back then? You had you had Steve saying that, and I was on the team at the time. I think we knew that things were changing and there was some kind of revolutionary stuff happening. What was the sense then, being sort of inside the submarine at the time? You were feeling the external pressures as things were sinking, or what was going on there?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think there was a sense that, if anything, give iPhone credit for being, a great iPod and a great consumer device. But, Microsoft had a history of, winning on the desktop with Windows. That was, just the standard in business and enterprises. And so I think, obviously it's easy to see the how wrong that was in hindsight. But at the time, the focus was like, no, we'll remain focused on the enterprise, remain focused on business. We're going to beat BlackBerry. This is going to become the standard. Enterprises, businesses will issue devices, to their folks. There'll be Windows mobile devices. This is how we're going to win. Nobody was bringing their Mac into the office and saying, you must connect it to the corporate network environment. I need to do my work on a Mac just because I say so. And so we didn't expect people could be able to do that with phones. It just wasn't a dynamic, I think, that was expected. And, obviously now in hindsight, enough people said, this phone is so good. Now I want to do my business stuff on it too. And slowly that started and bringing your own device became a thing, and just kind of it all went downhill. And so we were so focused in some respects on beating BlackBerry, on becoming an enterprise standard, that we just missed this consumer wave of a mobile device being so personal that it could influence corporate decisions, and we would ultimately be a little bit left behind, and perhaps just didn't have those OEM devices that had the same sexiness that the iPhone appeared to have. A part of that was because OEMs, would be like focused on cost down like early on, and so like capacitive touch was hard to convince OEMs to do because resistive touch was cheaper. But once you saw an iPhone, it's like, oh, that's what you can do with capacitive touch. It would be really good to invest a little bit more and make the device more expensive because the function was there.
I think there was a lot of religion on the bill of materials and saying, well, you really can't go over $200 or whatever the number was. And that really sort of said, well, then the display has to be this, and it's not capacitive, and it's not this. And I think the iPhone was like, meh, let's make this thing $600-700.
We don't care.
Yeah. Well, and then I think at the same time too, I don't know that we ever tried to do mobile operator exclusive types of things. I mean, iPhone launched on AT&T in the US exclusively. For like pretty much for 2 years, and we were like, hey, no, we want to be ubiquitous. We want everybody to have access to this, and we'll work with multiple OEMs and multiple carriers, and we'll get it everywhere. And it just sort of became this really thin spread of nothingness with no volume in a lot of places. And yet we still believe we were winning. Like I was, we were leading a team. I had, people were doing enterprise, people doing mid-market and SMB. We were beating BlackBerry. The numbers were looking good. Looking at how we thought about ourselves at mid-year reviews and other things, it's like, hey, if we were making progress or beating BlackBerry, that's all we were comparing ourselves to, early on. We were just kind of missing that this was kind of going on. We were putting together Post-it notes that had questions on them, like, why not, BlackBerry? If your customer asks that, what do you say? We were giving that to enterprise salespeople. We were not thinking about consumer devices walking in the back door of the enterprise. In fact, if we were trying to stop that. It's like, no, you should buy everyone Windows mobile devices and make it the enterprise standard.
Well, it was interesting. The dynamic, and I think Rob and I were talking about this before, was like, because Apple did such an exclusive at AT&T and kind of blocked out Verizon, at least in the US, they sort of forced Verizon to kind of quadruple down on Android. Remember the Droid campaign, which was 2009, holiday 2009. And so which kind of really put a rocket ship on the whole Android ecosystem and platform. And arguably there wouldn't be an Android ecosystem without that initiative, or it would have taken a lot longer. And so Apple, through their exclusivity with AT&T, might have, by accident, sort of empowered this whole Android ecosystem to spring up with all of Verizon's vengeance behind it. But not really a Windows Microsoft thing per se, but the whole emergence of the Android ecosystem was really probably due to the Apple exclusivity that was happening at the same time. But
yeah, I mean, it was just an interesting dynamic in terms of timing too, because while I was still at Microsoft, the Palm Trio launched on Verizon's network, so that sort of the 700W, I think was the model, and yet that didn't necessarily gain as much traction as had been expected. And by the time I was at Palm and the Trio Pro launched, the CDMA version launched on Sprint, and it wasn't available on Verizon's network. And so that was also like, sometimes, the carrier you choose,
sure.
It was, Sprint was sort of a perpetual number 4, even back then. So it was, well, they might've been number 3. I don't remember exactly.
There were 3. T-Mobile was always in last place.
Yeah.
Very
back then
dynamic. So I what can you say? There's, from a business standpoint, like, you just got to always be scanning the market. I think, if I had advice for people, like sort of looking back on that experience now, certainly to inform what I do now, it's like, beware exogenous factors. There's like, you can be so locked in on your own plan that you're not scanning the horizon for what else might be going on. And you also can't be afraid to cannibalize your own business. Like, If your product is, ugly and needs a complete refresh, then it should get one. I mean, I think the saddest thing for me is the designs for what became Windows Phone 7 and 8 and the stuff that, you're going to talk about in future episodes. Those were available pretty early on, or early versions of that. But it felt like there was this notion that no, it's got to have a start menu. It's got to look a certain way because it's Windows, and Windows has a particular look and feel. And I think you have to kind of throw that thinking out sometimes. It doesn't always need to be the same as what you have, and somebody who would be starting out new would take a different approach of it. So thinking that, hey, it's day one all over again, and if you had a blank sheet of paper, what would you do? I think that's important, even for established businesses. In fact, maybe even more important for established businesses, because they do kind of have those historic blinders on.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things around strategies, kind of the biggest factor in strategy, or what are the externalities that'll severely impact your business that you have no control over. So like job one is identifying those. And figuring out a plan there. And then the other part that you mentioned is, if your business is going to get disrupted, you better do it first. And otherwise, and it's hard. It's hard to do. Right. Yeah. But that's a good lesson for everyone today, building businesses.
Such a fine line to walk, because at the same time, you always hear advice of don't do that whole squirrel thing, worrying all the time about your competitors and what they're doing, kind of stay the course or stay focused. Because I hear that as much as I hear, boy, you better be looking around because someone's going to eat your lunch.
It's a good point. It sort of depends what you're looking for. If you're just looking around and saying, hey, what is my competitor doing? Let me go copy that. That's not particularly helpful. If you're looking at and saying, what does my customer really want? Not what do I want to sell to them, but what does my customer actually want to buy? That might change the dynamic. And then sometimes it is just the way that all comes together. So I mean, we had apps for Windows Mobile since before Windows Mobile was Windows Mobile, but we didn't have a marketplace. We didn't have an app store where you could get those sort of in this time frame that we're talking about. And that might have been just something we didn't think about. But if we had listened to customers, because we did hear customers say, it's hard to get software. I had to, tether my device. I had to load stuff. It was a complicated process for most consumers. And I think we were a little tone deaf to some of that because we were just so excited that you could load an app onto a device.
Well, and also in the business market, in the business context, the notion of an app store with sort of consumer-driven apps was still sort of a new thing. I remember, I'll give you a funny anecdote. I came into Microsoft in 2005 from the Silicon Valley area, and I was kind of a Qualcomm Brew person. And I'd worked with Qualcomm quite a bit. I knew the Brew ecosystem and blah, blah, and Peggy Johnson. And they had a pretty cool app store. It was all like Spider-Man bowling and a bunch of crap, but it was an app store. And I remember part of my, a lot of people at Microsoft, my first year was like a bunch of random assignments and random jobs and things. And I remember going into Susan Delbenny's office and she said, oh, I have a request. And she said, can you help, can you run this business, our app business? And I'm like, and she handed me these jewel cases with CDs on them. And I was like, what is this? She's like, oh, these are our apps. And I'm like, I don't understand. And she said, oh, you put this, so you put the CD in your PC. You connect your cable to the phone, and then and I'm just like, are you kidding me? But that was the way it was back then. And again, going back to that early statement about, connecting with a serial cable and syncing and disconnecting, I think Microsoft still had that mindset even back then in the mid, early 2000s. I think it took a while and it took a few kicks in the pants before, an app-based marketplace really took shape. And we'll talk about in later episodes, even when we had one, it kind of didn't quite work because there was the Windows marketplace and then there was the Windows Phone marketplace, which are two different things. And you submitted them in two different ways. And actually the payouts were totally different as a developer. So even going into like 2012, 2013, it was still kind of rough sailing on apps. Hard to believe. But yeah, back then, kind of 2007, 2009, as you mentioned that, most people know when the iPhone was first launched, they didn't even have apps. There were no apps. It was a web browser. And once they kind of combined iTunes and their music and apps, then things started to really take off. But that was, late 2008, 2009, something like that.
Yeah. And a web browser on 2G.
Yeah, 2G.
Not even 3G. So,
but it was the best web browser anyone had ever seen on a phone.
This is true.
Until, even though it'd be slow to load.
That's
no
true.
doubt about it.
When it finally did load, though, it was a full screen web.
Yeah.
And
when you think about that time frame, when you're doing Windows Mobile 6.1, and obviously the big reason for 6.1 was to bake in the device management capabilities, so enterprises could, because it was all about the enterprise. I want to manage pushing apps out there and that kind of thing. There's that bridge between that and what came Windows Phone 7 was this 6.5, 6.5.3, all that stuff. And we did cobble together some kind of marketplace on 6.5, as well as some kind of SkyDrive, SkyDrive, which would later become what everyone calls OneDrive today, and people use it. But there were a lot of things that began on the phone that felt like
true.
That don't get credit.
I think that maybe the one sort of benefit was, being a sort of a smaller group and maybe increasingly desperate. I don't know. It's like there was freedom to experiment.
Yes.
Right.
Or like the bigger parts of Microsoft were like, ooh, like we have this huge business. We can't, put parts of it at risk. And so we're not necessarily going to do that. And so, the mobile group, went off and kind of did their own things in other areas.
Right.
Wasn't afraid to, write software or kind of work with others to, to get something to, together to enable, those types of things. And so, for, all of the challenges, it was also a really exciting time with a great group of people. I mean, I certainly enjoyed working in the group and a lot of hardworking folks. And, regardless of how things turned out, it was a great experience. And, no knock on anyone in the group at the time. Some of those market forces just, as much as we tried to see them, we couldn't see them at the time, and things turned out the way they turned out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, there was a good set of people. So I guess at the end of the day, that's super important. But
you almost brought out the classic, Netflix analogy, with the whole video market thing going, right? Blockbuster Video. Everyone uses that analogy all the time. When you just like Windows and everybody else, we don't want to risk that business. So we'll let these crazy people over here do this mobile thing, except we ended up not turning into Netflix.
No, yeah.
Kept rewinding the videotapes, waiting for the next customer to come in.
Yeah, right. And I'm sure you'll talk about it in later episodes, but as additional features got developed and as it became Windows Phone, like there was stuff that people really liked. But by then it might have just been the wrong timing. So I think of our early sin was just like great effort, but ultimately on the wrong market. Maybe later was just like, maybe a little, too little, too late, with some of that, that effort.
Exactly. Good.
Could be.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time. It's great to see you again. And I love the collection of books you got back there. I got a lot of reading to do.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. And, we're going to package this up in our series here, and I think it'll be super insightful for folks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. No, I enjoyed the time. Hope the audience enjoys it as much as I did participating here with you today. So thanks very much.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us. This was great. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we're back. Way to go, Mr. Traynor. That was a good walk down memory lane.
It was really definitely in depth. Especially that kind of end period of Windows Mobile. But they definitely hit their stride on the value prop, against BlackBerry. Definitely hit the stride.
And
now one could argue it was the wrong stride in the wrong direction or whatever. But
and then looking at myself in that episode, I realized that I need to get my Windows Mobile. There we go. There you go. This is more appropriate.
Good swag there. Like John was saying, like they hit the target, but unfortunately the target kind of was moving. They hit the center of the wrong target maybe, but
he gave me a flashback. He talked about just briefly towards the end-ish about enterprise standard, like companies making Windows Mobile their enterprise standard phone, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that happened a lot, but it would happen later. But it took me back to a time, I'm going to say 08, 09, before Windows Phone came out. Our good friends at Nestle in Switzerland, I spent a big chunk of the summertime with them because one of the things I would do is create like large end-to-end mobile strategies for big customers. Like a lot of us lived at the executive briefing center until EBC is talking to these folks. And so I literally spent all this time in what are they? They're in Vevey, right between Montreux and Lausanne, and did the whole mobile strategy for them. And it was all about Windows Mobile. And it was Windows Mobile this and our device management and everything. And they were all on board. And then, I don't know, 6 months later, they're reaching out to me. They're like, so what is this Windows Phone thing that doesn't have any of the stuff that thing that you just made our whole company strategy on? I'm like, oh gosh, don't.
But I think also there was a different time in that back when smartphones started to pick up pace. I think there was a movement around, you had different phones. You had a work phone and you had a personal phone.
Yeah.
Everyone had sort of a candy bar feature phone. And then the smartphone was kind of like your business phone, or maybe it was given to you by your business. And so just like it was a computer asset, just like your laptop.
Yeah.
And there was a period there, and then it kind of shifted because then it became bring your own device, right? And it was like, no, you bring your personal phone, you join that into the corporate network, you get some certificates and some security, and then that's really how it went. And so there wasn't this idea of standardizing on certain platforms and things,
right?
Because everyone was bringing their own phone, and they're bringing a lot of iPhones. And in fact, the iPhone, just like the iPad, came into the corporate universe from the top. Usually some executive or leadership person said, I need to use my iPhone at work. And then all of a sudden it was like, blip, blip, blip. It all happened.
And if you remember at the time, you know how Apple is, or Apple was, we're not an enterprise company. We don't care about your IT department. We don't care about any of that stuff. And so, because all these companies are like, we need all this IT support because all these people keep bringing iPhones into the company and they want us to support them. And Steve Jobs was like, oh, well, pound sand.
Too bad. But they came in anyway. I mean, it was kind of a grassroots, or whatever the inverse is from corporate boardrooms, the opposite.
And I think we experienced that before with Windows 95.
Mm-hmm.
Like the notion of everyone had it at home and they love Windows 95, and then it just came into corporate America and all over the world because it looked so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it was a similar thing. And so I think, this part of the strategy, I think Microsoft was running the playbook around corporate owned devices.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, go there and make it the corporate standard, enterprise standard.
Right.
But then what happened was all these other phones started coming in the door from personal smartphones and kind of upset the apple cart.
And then we would try with clever marketing messages to assuage people. Like when we were getting at the end of Windows Mobile, Windows Phone is not yet here. But we told company, right when we made that change, though, we told companies, oh, no, we're still going to support Windows Mobile 6.5, X, whatever, for all these years, and OEMs are still going to ship it, and it's all going to be fine. And that's what we said, but that's not what happened.
No.
All the OEMs dropped Windows Mobile like a hot potato instantly.
Yeah. Now, there was corporate support. I mean, there's always corporate support for those things. But in terms of new devices and stuff, I mean, you couldn't find an OEM building a Windows Mobile phone after Windows Phone was announced. So,
do you remember this? Like we have so mobile communications business. We had the embedded guys. CE was always the underpinning, and obviously even into 2 versions of Windows Phone. But I remember we split things apart finally, and the embedded team went off to Advanta.
That's right.
And then there's the mobile team, and because if there was one area that we still controlled and still owned was that whole rugged mobile device barcode scanner in the factory on the warehouse, we still own that market.
Yeah, we did for a while, and then Microsoft did, and then Android came in, and
what did we do? We found a way. We seized defeat from the jaws of victory, or whatever. That quote.
Well, I mean, Android is an open platform. Ran on more silicon. It was less expensive. There was no license fee, basically. And so a lot of folks like Zebra and other folks started to adopt it, and there wasn't a need to maintain it. The other thing I think we did was it Windows CE, or we stopped supporting Windows CE, I think.
Yeah.
And tried to move people over to some version of like the mobile platform, but for CE.
There was a lot of weird talk and a lot of weird decisions by people you and I know over there that, we're going to use the new Jupyter platform, and we're going to have this Windows mobile thing for our rugged folks. Oh, no, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Never
mind.
Right. Oh, well.
No, it's tough. Well, also the priority was, saving the phone business all up, which had a significantly, as we'll find out in episode 6. We had a significant consumer tilt that, as we could tell from this episode and the previous episode too. I mean, Windows Mobile was really characterized by the business focus and the email focus and enterprise. As we get into Windows Phone and the reboot, takes a wildly radical turn toward consumer.
Well,
and that was the priority. That was a priority, and that episode will be with Joe Belfiore, which will be interesting. So we're talking about the launch of Windows Phone, but the next episode, just as a teaser, will be we've mentioned a couple times, the palette cleanser around Zune and Kin, and we will have none other than Jay Allard on the show.
How did we get Jay?
All kinds of things, talking about Xbox and Zune and Kin and being a heretic and all the good stuff, all the stuff Jay's good at.
Absolutely. I love that stuff. We're going to stir the
pot. Because things were at this point, there was a lot of drag racing going on inside of Microsoft about who had the right strategy. There was this strategy with Windows Mobile. At the same time, Zune was happening at the same time as this. Kin was starting to cook, and Kin started to cook in 2007.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like, and there was Robbie and Jay, and then there was Peter Canuck, and it was all these competing forces trying to figure out the right answer, and Terry and Joe and Henry and all that stuff. So it was a little bit of it was kind of crazy town a little bit.
It was
a couple of years there. Crazy town, and crazy things shipped, and we're going to talk about those crazy things.
I can hardly wait.
Next time on episode.
That's going to be a lot of fun. That's so interesting. That whole time frame with Ken.
Yes. Oh, we're gonna draw Windows Mobile, the curtain on Windows Mobile here.